Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. In 1906, the Royal Navy revolutionized battleship designs. They released a new warship named HMS Dreadnought. Dreadnought was such an innovation that her name became synonymous with all future battleships. They become called dreadnoughts for a whole generation. Earlier battleships are renamed as pre-dreadnoughts. Today, we mainly remember Dreadnought as being important because of her main guns. But that's not all. She had other, more important, in my opinion, design innovations. And we also forget that Dreadnought was not the only ship like that being built. So in this video, we're going to talk about what makes Dreadnought special. Why was she special enough to give her name to an entire generation of warships? So first, let's talk about the pre-Dreadnought style of battleships. They were fairly generic. Most of them had 11 or 12-inch guns in their main battery, as did the first generation of dreadnoughts. But they each tended to only have 2 turrets, usually 2 twin turrets, one forward and one aft. To make up for this armament shortfall, they also had a secondary battery, often of 8-inch guns or 9.2-inch guns, or in some cases they were smaller, like 6-inch guns. And then they had a tertiary battery of 5 or 6-inch guns, and they had 4-inch guns, 3-inch guns, multiple quick-firing guns of different calibers, just sticking wherever they could. They featured the same basic kind of armor as later dreadnoughts, and they tended to all be coal-fire, reciprocating engine. 18-knot speed is a good average for a battle line types of ships. The original battleship New Jersey, BB-16, is a typical pre-dreadnought. She had 4 12-inch guns, a turret forward and a turret aft. She had 8 8-inch guns, which was common for American pre-dreadnoughts of that time. On some, they're in corner positions around the superstructure with 2 on each side, so that 2 can fire forward, aft, or side to side. New Jersey, being a Virginia-class battleship, had her 8-inch guns, some of them superimposed over the 12-inch guns, and that didn't particularly work out great, but that was there. And then she had secondary or tertiary and later batteries of guns all over the superstructure. When pre-dreadnoughts first came about, they evolved out of the monitors and they became ocean-going vessels, but their turrets were slow to load and they weren't particularly accurate. You've got a guy up in a mast who's covered in coal smoke, who's trying to look at something a couple miles away and see where the shell splashes are. And he's got to determine the difference between the 12-inch shell splash and the 8-inch shell splash so that he can give each of those guns a different order, because the 8-inch guns are going to have to elevate more than the 12-inch guns. And the turreted guns ended up not hitting the target much. Like we're talking less than 2% accuracy during battles like Santiago, Manila Bay, and Tashima. The broadside guns, the lighter 6-inch guns or whatnot that are mounted into the side of the hull, like on a traditional sailing ship, tended to be the ones that were more accurate, believe it or not. Coming into the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, this started to change, and the range and fire control for guns became better. And the initial theory that the light guns can score hits and they can do enough damage to disable an enemy ship, and then you can get really close and sink it with your torpedoes, which most pre-dreadnoughts had, or your big caliber guns while they're a stationary target, starts to go out the window, and ships get heavy enough armor covering enough of the hull that the light guns aren't hitting, and new fire control systems will allow the heavier guns to hit. So a couple of different nations, all around the same time period, start investigating what we now know as an all-big gun capital ship, a dreadnought. The idea is you remove all the secondary and tertiary guns and put more 12-inch guns on there. When HMS Dreadnought was built, she had 5 twin turrets with one forward and one aft, another one midships aft that couldn't really fire aft because of the aft superstructure, and 2 wing positions side by side aft of the forward turret on each side of the forward superstructure. So she could fire about 4 on each side and maybe 1 or 2 forward and aft, depending on how much of an angle we're talking about. She wasn't the only ship designed like this at that time, and she's not particularly special because of it. The United States, Japan, and Italy were all looking at new types of battleships with more main battery guns. This is interesting. You've got Japan and the United States as up-and-coming powers who are looking at this in particular. And then you've got the established powers like Germany that is close to obtaining some sort of parity with Great Britain locally in the North Sea. And then established powers like Russia and France who do not want to evolve their ship designs because that will make all older ship designs obsolete. And that's true for the Royal Navy too. If Royal Navy puts out HMS Dreadnought, then their fleet becomes obsolete and they are no longer the dominant naval force in the world. Then they have to start the building race all over again, which is what happens, which eventually leads to World War I. So you've got countries like Japan and the United States that are up and coming that really push this, and once they do that, Great Britain realizes, well, the game's up, we've got to get ours out first. And that's the other special thing about Dreadnought. Dreadnought was built in just a little bit over a year. It took 3 years to build New Jersey, and that's something special. It should have taken 4. 4 years is a good average for battleship construction. The Royal Navy was able to do this in just a year. So even though other countries had finished their designs first, had maybe even started construction first, Dreadnought was the first one out there. And that's why we call them Dreadnoughts and not South Carolinas or Setsus. So, let's look at these other battleships that were being designed. In the United States, we had the South Carolina. Congress told the Navy, the U.S. Navy, how expensive and how heavy South Carolina could be. She was limited to the same 16,000 tons displacement as the previous Connecticut class. So, basically, she's just a Connecticut class hull where they've removed the 4 8-inch turrets and they've dropped in 2 more 12-inch turrets. South Carolina is very important because she superimposes the turrets, which is something that later dreadnoughts will almost exclusively do, but early dreadnoughts do not. South Carolina is really technologically advanced in that. She is not a full dreadnought in that she still had reciprocating steam engines. She hadn't advanced to a new style of engine, and therefore she only had a speed of 18 knots, the same speed as the pre-dreadnoughts, not any quicker. And that brings us to the other important thing about HMS Dreadnought. She made a speed of 21 knots because she switched to turbines. These are some of Battleship New Jersey's turbines. Turbines that ended up were more efficient than older reciprocating engines and could propel capital ships at faster speeds. So Dreadnought gets up to a speed of 21 knots, which now not only obsoletes Dreadnought or pre-Dreadnought type battleships, it also obsoletes pre-Dreadnought type armored cruisers. So in addition to Dreadnought causing battleships to have to evolve, it caused armored cruisers to have to evolve into battle cruisers to regain a higher speed. Because cruisers lack armor and make up for it in their speed, their ability to outrun heavier armed ships. So with a battleship that can now run down your armored cruisers, you got to escalate that too. Now you've also got Japan's Setsu, and she could have been the first dreadnought type battleship. Again, she didn't have special new engines or anything. Japanese battleships tended to be faster than other people's because they liked a doctrine of maneuverability. But because the Royal Navy laid down dreadnought and suddenly they needed more 12-inch guns, 10 instead of 4, per new ship, and they didn't just lay down dreadnought, there were other successive ones laid down immediately thereafter, and suddenly there weren't enough 12-inch guns in Great Britain. So even though Setsu was designed to have an all 12-inch gun battery, she ended up getting a mixed caliber battery. So she and South Carolina I would consider semi-dreadnoughts. Let's talk about some of the designers. The two major designers that are often associated with the leap to dreadnought are Sir Jackie Fisher, who was the First Lord of the Admiralty at the time, and he is the one who forced the idea of dreadnought through. He is the one who named dreadnought. It comes from his own family crest, Fear God, Dreadnought. He isn't a designer per se, but he is the personality to ram that through. An Italian naval designer named Cuniberti came up with arguably the first, although it's hard to say where the United States, Japan, and Cuniberti all were in their battleship designs. But he came up with an all-big gun battleship design that featured wing turrets much like pre-dreadnoughts. They were just a larger caliber. The Italian Navy did not accept his design, and they would end up coming into the dreadnought race fairly late. This meant that their dreadnoughts were a little bit more advanced and that they were able to retain those dreadnoughts into World War II, but they didn't have nearly so many dreadnoughts as other navies of the time. With the dreadnought arms race restarting the world stage, you see new naval powers emerging, like the United States. And other naval powers, since they've got a blank slate, throwing their hat in the ring. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Turkey. Greece bought a dreadnought, but it was never completed. Other minor countries like that joined major navies like Russia, France, Italy, Germany, and the United States and Japan in a dreadnought arms race. And this arms race was one of the major contributing factors to World War I. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. If you like the content we produce, check out the description below for ways you can donate to help the museum and help our YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified when we're putting out more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.